Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your weekly show Inside the Americas. Coming up in today's edition, will Donald Trump and senior White House staff start wearing a face mask whilst the rest of the country is urged to use personal protective equipment? The president says he will not wear one. Rio de Janeiro plunges into a health crisis. The city, known for its vibrant lifestyle, is now one of the epicenters of the coronavirus pandemic in South America. Face masks reflecting culture, colors, and art. Latin America's twist on wearing a face mask in a part of the world that has rarely seen the equipment outside of hospitals. The face mask has become commonplace in many countries across the world. Yet, in the United States, it continues to divide, whether it be politically or when it comes to protecting people's constitutional rights. President Donald Trump is a prime example. Despite over 80,000 deaths in his country, the president continues to refuse to wear a mask, as well as other senior members of his administration. Kathy Clifford-Kidia looks at this report.
Whether to mask up or not is the question of the moment at the White House. One thing's for sure, neither Donald Trump nor Mike Pence wants to be seen wearing one in public. This despite a recent tightening in preventive measures for the president.
The White House now is initiating an effort that the president and I not only will be tested every day, but I think everyone that comes into contact with the president will be tested every day.
But I noticed a lot of the reporters aren't wearing masks.
Just last week, 2 members of White House staff tested positive for coronavirus, one of the president's personal military valets and Mike Pence's press secretary, Katie Miller. But the news doesn't appear to have troubled the president. Trump reportedly told his advisors that wearing a face mask could, quote, send the wrong message and make it seem like he's preoccupied with his health rather than focusing on reopening the economy. Earlier in April, he said face masks weren't for him.
As I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself.
The vice president went on to visit coronavirus patients in hospital without wearing one, while President Trump visited a mask factory in Arizona barefaced. While politicians from across the spectrum back the social distancing measures, one study shows that 76% of Democrats are more likely to cover their face outside, while Republicans stand at 59%. Protests have broken out across the country against lockdown and against masks. The majority of protesters are Republicans and Trump supporters who see the measures as an infringement of their rights.
We have the freedom to choose what we have to do. If you lose that, then you might as well go to Venezuela.
Despite the soaring infection rate, several towns have gone back on their policies on face coverings. In Stillwater, Oklahoma, the mayor has softened rules following threats of physical violence towards those trying to enforce them. There have also been violent and even tragic incidents. In Flint, Michigan, security guard Calvin Munnerlin was shot dead at the start of May after he barred an unmasked customer from entering a shop.
California was one of the first US states to record positive coronavirus cases, but compared to other parts of the country, the western state dealt rather successfully with the pandemic, but it has amplified a very different problem: the inequalities between people. In a state known for Hollywood, the mansions of Beverly Hills, there is also widespread poverty for much of the population. France 24's team in LA sent us this report.
In the past 2 months, about 30 million Americans lost their jobs. Among them, actor Rob Pointer and musician Angie Correa.
Should we go outside?
Despite losing their income, this family still has to pay back 2 loans, $50,000 in medical debt and a $30,000 student loan.
All of the rhetoric about it being the greatest country in the world, but 40% of Americans don't have like $400 in their bank account. There's something wrong with that.
To provide for her family, Correa now uses her sewing skills to sell homemade masks on social networks. In just one day, she received more than 600 orders, enough to cover half her bills this month. Unemployment benefits last only 3 months on average in the U.S.
It's a really scary time for my family, and, you know, like, we all want to be like, I'm cool, I'm fine, but it's not the reality for a lot of Americans. And I think that this virus is really, like, exposing that in such a massive way, because it's a privilege to get to shelter at home, and it's a privilege to work from home. That's like a white-collar quarantine, and there's a lot of people who don't have that privilege. And there you go.
Among those who can't afford to stay confined are farm workers, described as essential workers by the U.S. government. In California, agriculture employs 400,000 people. Many of them are undocumented migrants. Carmen Obeso has been working in strawberry fields since she entered the U.S. illegally 13 years ago. This single mom with 2 young children pays taxes, but is ineligible for U.S. government assistance during the pandemic.
Es un sacrificio que tenemos que hacer nosotros ahorita, pues estamos trabajando es para poner la comida en la mesa de las personas que se tienen que quedar en casa, de las que se pueden quedar en casa.
The Trump administration has approved trillions of dollars for economic stimulus and relief during the pandemic, but no support was included for the 11 million undocumented living on U.S. soil.
Brazil has become South America's worst-hit country, with thousands of cases emerging every day. Rio de Janeiro, known for its carnival and party lifestyle, is now one of the main clusters in the country. With medical supplies scarce and President Jair Bolsonaro a firm opposer of lockdown restrictions, there are fears that the pandemic could spread even faster. Solange Moulin explains how the virus has affected the city.
A beach celebrated the world over. 4 kilometers of fine sand, generally packed with bathers, lies deserted. The sun still shines down on Copacabana and on neighboring Ipanema, but the beaches of Rio de Janeiro are under lockdown by order of the governor. Some boarders and swimmers just can't resist the temptation, though.
Maravilhoso, né? Que a água fica limpa, transparente.
Os policiais, eles não param você?
Sim, eles daqui a pouco estão chegando, por isso que a gente sai agora.
The lockdown in Rio is relatively relaxed. Even if beach stands are closed, residents still walk and jog along the boardwalk. But the only people allowed on the bay are these fishermen.
Chegamos em paz, pouquinho de peixe, dá para arrumar o do café, se Deus quiser.
From its beaches to its mountaintops, Rio is still there, unshakable. But the pace has changed. For the first time in its history, the sanctuary of Christ the Redeemer, the city's icon, is closed to the public. There is barely a soul in sight. But it is not abandoned. In the chapel at the base of the statue, Father Omar celebrates Mass. In the company of the sanctuary's staff, he broadcasts the service online.
Seja feita a vossa vontade. É uma experiência diferente, né? A gente poder contemplar a natureza, a beleza da cidade do Rio de Janeiro, camarote da cidade do Rio. A gente ter uma saudade, né?
The lockdown has encouraged wildlife in the surrounding national park to go exploring.
Eles tá vazio, eles começam a subir, né?
Forest rangers have seen animals that are normally pretty shy adventure out, including some monkeys. When the sun goes down on the hills of Rio, its statue still shines bright. Illuminated with a message, a mask can save a life. The guardian angel of Rio is also wearing one, in solidarity with an entire nation and with the world as they face the pandemic.
Rarely used in Latin America outside hospitals before the pandemic, face masks are now often compulsory once you leave the house, and they're becoming a colourful part of daily life. People have taken up to decorating them in fun ways. They can look stylish, reflect an aspect of local culture, or even send a powerful message. Peter O'Brien takes us on a tour.
From Mexico to Bolivia and Peru to Cuba. Across Latin America, it seems everyone's got their own take on the face mask.
It's a new way of expressing yourself. I don't even have to speak. You know from my mask what I'm trying to say.
When the virus first began to spread on the continent, pharmacies quickly ran out of conventional masks. But with lockdowns putting the brakes on business, local manufacturers have been happy to step in. In Mexico, this traditional clothing shop is helping customers match masks with mariachi sombreros.
Artisans who didn't used to make these, who didn't even sell to us but were with our competitors, are joining us because we have so much work for them.
Meanwhile, in Peru's capital, John Sanchez stopped printing designs on mugs and t-shirts and began making masks adorned with patriotic slogans.
We all see people wearing them, and it reminds us of the disease and what's happening. So I wanted to add a positive message to them.
The messages on these masks, made by Bolivian activists in La Paz, are more provocative and are meant to reach out to women suffering domestic abuse while under lockdown. They read things like, "Don't stay alone, connect with your female allies."
We have not stopped thinking. We've not stopped protesting because we have to stay at home. Staying at home is not the same thing as staying quiet at home.
The sale of these masks is a vital source of income for the rights group. Across the continent, grassroots mask makers aren't just bringing others a dash of colour and hope, they're also giving themselves a lifeline amid a paralysed economy.
Thank you very much for watching. See you next week for another edition of Inside the Americas.
Je regarde France 24 parce qu'en tant qu'étudiante en sciences politiques, ça me permet de rester à jour sur les informations dans le monde, sur les conflits, les débats politiques, tout ça.
الاختلاف بين فرنسا 24 والقنوات التانية في المحتوى المتنوع وفي التوجه الأقرب للحيادية.
I like their coverage, especially with the news and the politics, but also I like the cultural aspect because that, me as a Kenyan, I get to learn a lot about Francophone, Africa, Francophone in general, whether it's in Europe or here, just from France 24.
France 24 m'aide à voir une perspective plus complète du monde et à comprendre différentes langues et différentes cultures.
France 24, with you everywhere, all the time. Liberté, égalité, actualité.